It is day 11 of the novel challenge. That's incredible. You got to celebrate those double digit prime numbers. And not only that, we are 4 days away from actually beginning the novel writing process. That's exciting. So, my name is Brad Pauquette, and I have an important message for you today as you continue to develop your novel concept. Characters are people too. And this is one of the biggest objections I get from writers. One of the biggest problems that they have as they're trying to work out their novel manuscript is they say, well, I don't want that type of character in my story. Can I substitute it with something else? So I'm here to tell you emphatically that no, unfortunately, your characters cannot be systems, ideas, objects, symbols, or anything of the like. Your characters have to be people, in a manner of speaking. So earlier in the novel challenge, we spent some time talking about the 7 character functions that must be present in your story. And there's no workaround for that. Unfortunately, your readers can feel when those character functions are missing. One of the things that we'll do here with my apprentices at the company headquarters in Cambridge, Ohio, is we will watch movies that had so much potential and just fell short of the mark. One of my favorites to watch is Passenger, which stars Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence, and they're stuck on this spaceship. And it's such a cool story, such a cool premise, but it just falls short. So we watch these movies and then we ask the question, why? And always we can trace the problem back to the novel matrix. There's an issue with the story that relates back to the story structure, or a failure to develop 5 distinct conflicts, or in many, many cases, a failure in the cast list. For instance, when the guide is missing, often viewers they don't know why, they can't explain it, but they leave the movie saying things like, I just felt listless, like I wasn't sure what the character wanted. And what they're expressing, without knowing why or what they're expressing, is that there was no guide to help them understand the universe and the direction the protagonist was supposed to take. So it just felt like the protagonist was kind of wandering around the story, figuring out what to do. So you have to have those 7 archetypical character functions present in the story. And yes, they do have to be filled by people. Now, let's take a moment and talk about what a people is. So, what is a person? Is a question we want to ask, and we might follow that up with what is personhood. And we're not talking about it in at all the legal sense, but when we think of what a human being is, what a person is, I think we think of a few common characteristics. One thing is that people are interactive. It's possible to have a conversation of some sort with a person, and that doesn't always look the same. For instance, if a character has some kind of handicap, perhaps they can't speak or can't communicate in one form or another, but you can still have an interaction with that character. Information and emotion can still be exchanged from one character to the other. People are creative, and that's just part of how God made human beings. People have desires, and people have unique desires from other people. People are capable of both reacting to things and being proactive. And people have individuality. Each person is different from every other person. So, as long as you're hitting things like that, and that's not an exhaustive list, those are just some things that occurred to me when I thought about what makes a person different from an object or a symbol. As long as your character is hitting some of those things, there are a lot of ways that we can be creative in the types of characters that we employ. For instance, your one of your characters could be a robot. In fact, in lots of stories, we see tons of characters who are robots and are successful character functions in the story. Everything from Hal in A Space Odyssey to Rosie in The Jetsons. Your character can be an intelligent animal. That's something that we see lots of examples of. Again, as long as it's capable of interacting, like there can be communication exchange with that character, and the animal can be creative and has desires and ability to react and also be proactive and is an individual. It it can work as a functional character in the story. Here's a common question that I get. What if the character is actually a group? What do you do then? And that's actually super common. And the successful strategy there is to have one member of the group that rises to the front and becomes symbolic of the fate of the group. So it's very difficult for your reader to pay attention to a group and understand what happens to a group as a whole, partially because we know that's not how the world works. No groups are homogenous, right? Groups are made up of individuals. And while they may seem to present a unified front, each of those individuals is slightly different and nuanced in the way they understand their membership in that group. And they have their own unique experiences in the world despite being a member of that group. But the best way to handle this is to have one character that comes to the front of the group. A really good example of this is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. So, Katniss, who's the protagonist of The Hunger Games, is technically put in a position where she has to fight 23 other tributes to the death. And so, technically, it is Katniss against this group of 23 people. But Suzanne Collins does something that's really masterful, and you can see this both in the book and in the movie. And that's that one of the tributes, named Cato, rises to the surface. And as Cato goes, so goes the group. So Cato becomes symbolic of the fate of the group as a whole. So now, even though we do need to conceptually understand that she is up against a group, we have that one focal point where we can place our attention and we understand that what happens to Cato is representative of what's happening to the group. And we see that in a lot of different contexts, but even technically speaking, in your big world external conflict, that's almost always the case. The mega antagonist, so Cato, this is a separate example. Cato is not the mega antagonist. He is just the antagonist in that story. But almost always in that big world external conflict, the mega antagonist becomes representative of the quote unquote evil group in the world. So those character functions really aren't negotiable. I'm sorry. I wish they were. But, when we examine lots and lots of stories, of course, there are outliers, right? Of course, movies like Castaway with Tom Hanks exist, and there are outlying stories that don't do it this way. But by and large, the vast majority of stories represent those 7 character functions, and it's important to the reader or the viewer in the way that they understand the story, in the way that they relate to it. And so you really can't skip any of those functions. You can absolutely get creative. There are tons of ways to creatively employ these character archetypes in unconventional ways, or maybe in ways that they still have personhood in the scene, even if they're not necessarily present in the scene. There are lots of ways that you can get creative with that and still bring that personhood. But nonetheless, a person, a people, so to speak, still has to perform that character function. So keep playing with those novel matrix plans. Your assignment for today is to continue to build out the plan, continue to build that scene list, and double check your characters. Make sure that each character function is being represented by a person of some sort, and your story is going to be a lot more successful. So play with that. Continue to have fun with it. We're getting closer and closer to writing day. So until I see you tomorrow, happy writing and be blessed.